Hi, Zoe. Good morning from me. And remind me the time zone you're in again?
Hi, Reed. Good morning. And yes, it is Pacific Standard Time. So it is
Okay, perfect.
9:30 in
Yeah,
the morning here.
exactly. So yeah, it's I always have to remind myself of if I is it a morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on the person calling in,
It's
or the
true.
next day from the future if it's Australia.
Yes,
Well, thank you again
exactly.
for joining me today on this. I think it's been a long time coming to get you on and certainly talk about some of the stuff related to Power BI. So I appreciate you coming on with your Friday and joining for the stream.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This has been great. I think, was it you did one with Iki? He's like, you should go talk to Reed. I was like, all right, cool. So I'll talk to Reed.
And okay, sorry. Somebody was mentioning echo in the Matthias. You might have two tabs of the live stream on, maybe, but I think audio is fine otherwise. So
Ah,
with this, and what I love to do for any first timers in the stream is, as we're kind of getting started, give us a chance to talk a little bit, get to know each other, but also give you a chance to introduce yourself to the stream. So kind of who you are, what you do, and any involvement you kind of have, with Microsoft as well. If you want to give a little introduction about yourself.
sure. Yes. So my name is Zoe Douglas, and I am a PM in the product group for Power BI and Microsoft Fabric. Right. So I've been working on stuff like DAX Query View, Direct Lake, Copilot, all those kind of things. So,
And what got you there? Like, what was on your journey that kind of led you to the team that you're on today?
so I was a longtime data analyst, right? So I was in Excel land and then doing VBA and doing all kinds of things, and then got into some data engineering for a while and doing databases. And then Power BI came out. And so I started using analysis services. I created a few of those running Azure analysis services. And then we got Power BI. Power BI came out and it was fantastic. And so I did that consulting for a long time. And that was a lot of fun, and I saw an opening on the product group on the on Twitter of all places, and which I'm not very active on Twitter actually, which is makes the story even more interesting because
I mean, a lot
I
of
always
people
get
aren't anymore.
I always get logged out and I have to reset my password and I never can remember it. Anyway, so I'm better on LinkedIn. Anyway, so I saw the job posting for the position I'm in and I applied, and the rest is kind of history. So but now I get to work on adding all the things I ever wanted to Power BI, which is makes me very happy.
It's nice when you get be the list writer to a degree of you're like, all right, I have all these wants and desires. Like, which one of these are actually tangible and can happen? Like, all right, this is gonna take 6 months. This could be like 6 weeks. All right, let's do the 6 week items.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it is, we have different, obviously strategic, initiatives that we're working on. And so more likely it's not like I don't just get to like randomly pick, oh, today I'm going to add this to the product, right? There's a whole bunch of planning and discussion that goes into anything that's added. And then, finally I get kind of a feature that I'm going to work with engineering and design to kind of actually, bring that vision to reality. And that's kind of exciting. That's really exciting. Even if you're kind of limited in that way, right? There's so much you can do in that space.
So, curious question to that then. Given that you're able to make a lot more of like what your heart desire requests, helping run the team. What's been something that's either publicly available in preview or that has been released that's been your favorite so far, and what's an upcoming one that you're also really excited about before we get started on the topic of the day?
Oh, sure. I mean, every one of my features is my favorite, of course. So
It's like saying all your
that's
children are
easy.
your favorite. Like secretly you have one that's your favorite. Ah, had this happen a couple of times with Skype. So, oh, there we go.
Oh, there
Okay,
we're back. They're back.
brief little blip. We're good.
So
Go
you
ahead.
say, do I have to pick one? Is that what you're saying? You're making me pick a
If you
favorite?
could, like in a alternate universe, what would the favorite feature that's been released so far be? And we won't tell the other feature that you said this.
Without the other features.
Yeah.
So honestly, it is really hard. Like Direct Lake is amazing, and also DAX Query View, right? That's a big one that I worked a lot on. Bringing that into desktop, bringing it to the web. That's been really cool. Model Explorer. Okay, so I'm not like picking it all. I'm just listing my features at this point. But they're really cool, like things that I was able to kind of work with and get them in the product, and that's amazing. And then one that's not mine, like I really really love everything that Miguel's doing with like the visuals,
Mm.
right? The new slicers and the new cards and kind of all the options there. And he gets to hear me complain if I don't like anything, or like, where is this, where'd this go, whatever. But everything he's doing is amazing. It's really exciting to kind of see those updates coming into Power BI.
It's definitely been for me some of the most exciting things with the PBI core visuals team and everything
Oh,
Miguel's
yes.
been doing. Just because we're finally getting like someone who's really into design and aesthetics. Like he has a whole background and degrees in that, but
Yes.
then also I think it's a lot of much needed features that's helping to that bridge that gap that's remaining between ClickView, Sparkfire, Tableau, and all the other ones that have had a lot more customizability in the native visuals thing. So we're definitely getting some needed upgrades in the
Yeah.
native
And the
visuals
smooth
platform.
lines. And the smooth lines on the bars. I'm so excited about
I
that one. On the lines.
was so
Yeah. So.
yeah, was so happy that though. Like I even actually just last week when Will Thompson was on our stream, he was showing two different dashboards. I think the native one was the one that was built in to show the lines for real-time analytics actually was using the smooth or like the spline line.
Yep.
Funnily enough, when you actually click generate a report to create the Power BI report, it still has the standard jagged lines, even though it's available to like reconfigure because it's just a report page. But I thought it was funny that like one was using the modern one versus the other. But it looks so much prettier.
It all takes engineering effort, right? So sometimes you got to let some things go, but it's definitely there and available. And obviously everything that Rui's doing with like the Tyndall stuff and getting the Git integration, all that really cool stuff, and having a new PBR, all that kind of stuff. And Jay has this amazing the visual calcs on the visuals, right? I think we're doing a lot of stuff across the board, and I worry sometimes it gets kind of overshadowed a little bit and people don't notice as much, but man, we're doing so much in Power BI right now.
And just one quick shout out before moving on, just Matthias Tierbach, of course, with Rui and like getting everything for accomplished with all of that. But yeah, there are a lot of great things across the board. And back to your mention on the DAX Query View, and also onto the topic of the day today. So like I think some of the use cases with that, but also some really good practices that we'll be going over on both Power BI Desktop and Fabric. So where would you like to start the conversation on kind of exploring what we'll be talking about today?
Yeah, so let's start with Microsoft Fabric, right? So I think most people have, if you haven't, obviously people have heard about Microsoft, haven't, right? It's just we put everything into the workspace in Power BI. But all the data can now be stored in the one lake, and it actually enables it to be used across multiple workloads, right? So, but what I wanted to show kind of how does this fit with Power BI, right? And so if we share my screen, we can talk about this a little bit. So here I have my workspace, right? And I have a lake house. This is a Fabric. It's on a capacity. And we have the new direct lake storage mode, right? So Power BI typically has import and direct query, right? And you want to use direct query. So import, you're moving the data into your semantic model. You have to schedule a refresh, but it's really fast. We put it in the right format that we can read it. The analysis service engine can read it really nicely and very fast. So you have these really interactive reports from these models that are in import mode, right? But you are moving data, and you have to manage a refresh, you have to schedule it, and that can, make sure it's in line with whatever data engineering process you have. And you just have kind of multiple, versions of it, not multiple versions, but you have the data kind of stored in multiple places, right? So then we have direct query mode. So that's saying, okay, if you have your data in a SQL database, what we'll do is we'll basically convert all those visual DAX queries to SQL queries. And it eliminates the need to move the data. You always get the latest from the database, but you have that translation layer. And so it's slower than import, and unless you have a really beefy SQL database. It's really pushing a lot of that a lot of the performance like to the SQL database, right? And so we see some issues. We've done a lot of optimization for direct query over the years, a lot of things that you can do to make it faster. We have, the aggregations, we have auto aggregations. Like once you set that up on your report, it'll start seeing the queries you're sending and start kind of getting that information aggregated and kind of pre-stored, right? Because there's a lot of cool things you can do for direct query. But but you have that kind of performance issue and you still have to kind of manage that. So then now we have the one lake. Oh, and then the other one with import is eventually the data gets too big, right? You have to bring it all to your computer, put it in your memory, right? So eventually, and most of the time we hit it, is the data just gets really unwieldy, right? So then there's, strategy you can use with that, like with incremental refresh and all that kind of stuff that you can do to kind of mitigate those solutions. But now we have the one lake. And what's cool about these Parquet files and the Delta tables is they're very similar to this way we store the data natively when we are in import mode, right? So we don't have to have that kind of translation later. We can actually just read the data right out of that tables, just like you could with like the DirectQuery with the SQL. But now you can do it without that kind of latency, and it's extremely fast, right? So you have, not only are you no longer moving data, you're no longer copying at places, you no longer have to schedule refresh, but you can also now handle so much more data than you could before, right? Even with DirectQuery, even with import, right? You have amazing, you can bring in so much more data from the one lake. And then also this data isn't just for Power BI. You can use it for notebooks. You can use it for all kinds of things, right? Right. So what I wanted to show in Fabric is, right, so you're bringing this data, you're going to move your kind of data engineering over into Fabric, which is fantastic. You have a lake house. It's going to write that data into I don't know what I did with my thing here, right? So here I just have a simple, you can use M here with like a data flow to put the data in the lake house.
Yep.
I have a notebook where I have a script I have over here on my blog where I just generate some data. So this is kind of a quick way to kind of get data for a model. So I have my notebook here, and I just have 1 billion rows, one fact table, and I have some dimensions down here that I'm bringing into my lake house. So this is really cool. Now I have this data in the one lake, right? And I can schedule this notebook to run if I really wanted to, but for this one, it's just a demo. If you wanted to bring it from someone, you can put this in a pipeline, right? And you have these really cool, like before in Power BI, like say you're bringing data, it's import, right? You're getting data and storing it just in analysis services, right? You still have to go schedule that. And then you didn't really have control. Oh, I want to refresh this table weekly, this table hourly, this table never again, right? You have so much more flexibility with Fabric. Now you can do pipelines, you can orchestrate, then you can test the data and say, okay, well, hey, if this number, we counted the number of rows, if we don't see something we like, we'll rerun, right? We can check things. I used to do this in SQL Server SSIS, right? And I would actually use it to do incremental refresh. I would just figure out what the ID was in the database, what ID was in my analysis services, and I would then just bring in the delta, right, in a partition app. But you can do this kind of stuff very easily in Fabric. It's right here for you. All this stuff here, you schedule a pipeline. Maybe this table will never refresh again. This one will refresh every minute. This one will refresh once a month or whatever, right? So you have so much control over this guy. But once you have it in there, you're like, okay, cool. I brought some data in. Here's my lake house, right? And then if you want to see the other ones here, you can use kind of, upload a file, right? Just toss a file there. No longer do you have to worry about like gateways and stuff, event streams, all that cool stuff. Now we have this data here. Now, how can we use this in Power BI, right? So the direct lake mode is very accessible, right? You just go new semantic model, and you're going to be creating that direct lake semantic model. You just pick the tables and stuff. Now you're like, well, Zoe, but I don't get to, adjust my columns or, transform it like I could in Power BI. You can do that at those, in the notebook, at the lakehouse is kind of like your new kind of get data experience and transform data experience for these direct lake semantic models, right? So I can go ahead and create this new semantic. But what's also cool about this lakehouse is it has a SQL endpoint. Right, so you can see down here, we have that SQL Analytics endpoint, right? We also have this default semantic model. Now, this one is a little different. This is really associated with that SQL endpoint. Now, the SQL endpoint is cool because now I can write, obviously, SQL on my data, right out at the bat. Like, if you want to write SQL, you want to write DAX, you're covered, basically. And then the model here is this default semantic model. Now you can only edit this one here. This is a direct lake semantic model. but they're created empty until you go ahead and click this kind of manage default semantic model. And there are some limitations you need to be aware of when you're utilizing this, right? So you're limited to this editing experience inside the SQL endpoint. You can't do XMLA read write. So if you want to use external tools, you want to use tablet editor, you won't be able to do that on the default semantic. You can't write DAX queries or DAX Query View, and kind of the web model experience as well. You can't do row level security, that kind of things, no fixed identity, all that kind of stuff. Those stuff you're going to want to create a standalone direct lake semantic model, not one that's so tightly integrated with the SQL Analytics endpoint. But for
And
this
you have a lot more
great,
customization options and everything.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, but this is great. Like, say you're like, I don't care about any of that. I just need to create a report. Just want to make my relationships, do a couple measures, and create a report of it. This will do the job, and you don't have to worry about kind of all those fancy things. So this is actually really great to have kind of as part of this. But for my discussion today, I'm going to focus on the really the standalone direct lake semantic models, right? So you just go here, you go new semantic model, you give it a name, right? So new direct lake model. And you can even put this in a different workspace, right? You're not limited to just the workspace you're in. You can actually create them in different workspaces. And then you can pick the tables that you want to bring in. If you have views, you can pick it. But at this point, the direct lake is going to fall back to DirectQuery. And we can talk about that a little bit. So the way we have direct lake running right now is it's actually a child object of the SQL endpoint. So the way this works is that, so if something happens and you can't do direct lake, it will fall back, because we have all these lakehouses that have a SQL endpoint. We're saying, well, okay, fine. We actually have a storage mode, DirectQuery, that talks SQL. So if something happens, we'll just fall back to SQL. Your reports are not impacted. They don't show errors. They're just going to be a little slower as it goes back through. And it gives you this ability to kind of use views if you like to. And so we have this notice here that says, if, you're going to be falling back. You want to avoid this if possible to get the best experience out of direct lake. But we have some ways for you kind of test out, well, how bad is it going to be? Should I be concerned? That kind of stuff. But every view has to talk SQL. So anytime the semantic model has to talk SQL, it has to be in direct query mode, because that's the only mode that talks SQL. So if you put like security on your SQL endpoint or something like that, or anything like that, then it's going to also fall back to DirectQuery. It has to check in and make sure you haven't limited something in the SQL endpoint. Right, so let's just do the Delta tools.
Yeah, once you're done with this, I'll have a couple quick questions from the audience about a few of the things you just mentioned, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Let me bring this up from Steven.
I don't see the chat, so.
yeah, and I'll put it onto the screen and read it. So Steven wanted to know what would be a good use case for SQL endpoint. His users are already having 4 users that already have access to, say, either the Dataverse or views in like Snowflake as an example.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really where you want to work, right? And the SQL, this puts it like, if you can shortcut to Fabric and you can have them have access here. I don't really know how it works when they're using Snowflake and how they access it, right? And for direct lake, you can only use the direct lake mode if you've brought it into Fabric first. So maybe I'm not the best person for that specific question. I mostly focus on the semantic model piece, but the SQL endpoint is really just kind of, you can just run the SQL queries on the data you've brought into the one lake, and you can shortcut from Snowflake to do that.
And one other from right here. I'll hopefully pronounce it correctly. Nishant wanted to know if once the data is in the lake house, do we need Fabric capacity turned on to get the data out of the lake house?
Yes, I think so. That's a great question. Now, if you're talking about like if you wanted to put your semantic model in like a different workspace or something like that, right? This one I'm not 100% sure on. I would check the Lakehouse docs, but I think you do, right? The Lakehouse is part of the Fabric capacity. Perfect, or premium. You. Okay, and then, okay. So now I have this model, right? So I have it here. I have it in, I've created it new. I can go ahead and create my relationships. You have the model explorer here, right? So I can actually go ahead and create relationships if I wanted to. I can rename tables and columns. Let's see, I'll do date one. And then we can do month one. I'll do one and then I'll drag the rest. So you have these, you can create the relationships here. You can do everything you could do before, right? This is very similar to kind of what you get in desktop. Obviously, you don't have a report view. You'd have to create a new report and show it in a different tab here. But basically now you're semantic modeling, right? So just like you would before, you can rename tables, rename columns, add calculation groups. You can do your row level security. Now, if you want to get into the row level security, I have another blog. I have a write-up of it on my blog. Really the key part is you need to set that fixed identity. When I created this one, right? So I just created it 2 seconds ago. I didn't schedule refresh. I didn't put my credentials anywhere. So the default is single sign-on, which means people who are using this report are going to use their credentials to access the lakehouse. Now, if to get to the data in the OneLake, now if I wanted to put this in a workspace or just give people only access to the semantic model and the report, I can do that. I can then remove their access to the lakehouse or the OneLake data directly, and instead they would I'd do a fixed identity, just like you would in import or DirectQuery, where if you don't have all your end users permission on that SQL database in DirectQuery, you would specify your credentials to go access that database. The tricky part here in Fabric is all co-located in the workspace, right? So if you give them access at the workspace level, you're going to give them access to the source and the semantic model. All right, so here I've created this one here in the direct lake semantic model. Again, I can access this. So if I go to semantic model, I have the server here, which is the XMLA. I can connect this with Tablet Editor, SQL Server Management Studio, all that stuff. And then I have this direct lake behavior, right? So before I was talking to you about this behavior where it falls back. So that's an automatic setting on the direct lake behavior. But I can actually set it to be direct lake only. Now it's still going to have to check in with the SQL endpoint periodically to make sure you haven't put security or done something there that it needs to be concerned about. But the direct query only then just accesses those files through the SQL endpoint. It's always doing SQL conversion. Right. So that's what this one's really, we have an article about this. You know, it's really great for testing. Like, okay, so I have this beautiful direct lake. What happens if it does fall back? How bad will it be? What do I need to mitigate for? Do I really want to allow this? You can test it out, right? So you can force it into DirectQuery. You can see what the difference is. All right, so here, and I'll get into that one in a minute. All right, so I already have one of these created. The other thing you can do here is you can use DAX Query View as well. So we just did DAX Query View for the web. So if I go back to my workspace, right, so I'm in my direct, this is the one I already had created. Let me just get out of that. And I have the new one here as well. I won't scroll, there it goes. So I have this new one that I just created, and I have the one that I already had created before, right? So I could even use, now the DAX Query View in the web is for people who can edit the semantic model. It's not a read-only experience just yet. For your consumers, they can use Live Connect and Power BI Desktop to access DAX Query View that way and run DAX queries on the model. Now, what's cool about this is
in Mac user language.
Yeah. So, and then we do want to do like a read-only in the web too, but for right now we're just focusing on the model authors. Right. So here I have one already created, and I had a few measures. So I go to my model view. I have 8 measures already created. Now I actually want to add it to my new one. So I can copy this guy, go back to here, go to my new semantic model, write DAX query here.
This is one little call out to the live stream that I did with Jeffrey back in December, right near the holidays. But I do remember him mentioning that, like, at some point, there's no date, but like summarized columns will be able to get used in measures, and because they work in desktop. Like 3 weeks ago, I published a model, and summarized columns broke in a measure because it works. It used to be it worked in desktop, but it would break in the service.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it still breaks in the service. It's not a recognized type of function. It can only be used like in the visuals, but at some point soon we can use them in measures, because it used to be you'd have to use summarize, add columns, the combo of that, because summarize was only kind of a reserved backend thing. But it's hopefully, fingers crossed, someday soon on the unknown date, like it will work in the service, and I'm really excited for that.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I was just looking at that. that just had come to my attention recently as well. But yeah, it's very, very cool that we're constantly making changes to DAX as well, right? Okay, so here I had the second one I just created. I had no measures in it. And then I just actually copied those from the other one. And this is kind of neat. So I can define them all here. I've defined all my measures at once. I can see them, right? And I can still do, now this you could do in, by the way, all the storage modes. I'm just showing in the web is kind of the only way you can do it with the direct link, but you can do this in import and DirectQuery as well, in desktop or the web. All right, so here, this one is the one I just created, remember, and it has a lot of columns, a lot of data in this thing. And I can actually just add this in here with DAX Query View. So now I can go back to, let's see here, my new direct lake. So now the standalone ones and also import, you can also edit in the web just by that model. And then you can see those measures I just added to my model from the other one, right? So this is if you want to kind of reuse some measures. DAX Query View is really great at this. You could just script it, paste it in, have Copilot help you, whatever you want to do. And speaking of Copilot, in desktop and web, you can create measure descriptions on all those measures I just created. So it's going to go ahead and think. It's working really nicely and fast today. I like it.
The demo gods are happy.
The demo gods are happy today. This is not usual. It's usually the other way. Okay, there now. I've jinxed it.
Oh no!
Right. So you can go ahead and add these in here. The big question is, hey Zoe, do these descriptions work in our Copilot? They will soon. So if you're using DAX Query Copilot to write a query, will it look at the descriptions? It will be soon. It doesn't just yet. But these are really great for your report authors. They can now see kind of what's going on. They can get an understanding. You can copy in the DAX expression if you want and these things. And once I've created them, right, it's just the same as before. You can modify it, do whatever you want, right? So I've just added those 8 measures. I've gone ahead and given descriptions. I most likely would format them. I can put them in folders, all this kind of cool stuff. So let's see. So I have cost and I have profit and sales. So I can just quickly, one of the things also we added for the model view in both desktop and web too is in this model explorer, if you have a folder, you can actually drag things into that folder, out of that folder, and that kind of stuff too. You can do it in the report view. Folders are great, right? So,
yeah.
And then, all right, so this is so cool. So you've showed me Direct Lake. So let me show you now, open up desktop. Okay, so you can create a report in the web, but unfortunately the web report view doesn't have performance analyzer. And what I wanted to show you real quick was, if I go to OneLake Data Hub, there's that new one, and there's the one I already have created. We can connect to both, but I think I'm going to connect to this guy, right? So I'm live connecting, and I'm going to build a report. Let's see. Right. And so I'm just going to quickly bring in just a few data points. Just want to show. Ooh, that's a new one.
That's a desktop. I've had a couple of those random things in desktop. It's use like a Web 2.0 kind of bug. Oh
no, please no. But
hey, it's still working, so that gets transient.
Yeah. So the other thing is I'm also running like pre-builds, so sometimes it gets upset with that one. Now let's go back to here real second. So I noticed. Let's see. Let's go back to my workspace. I'm going to go to this Direct Lake semantic model. I'm going to open this data model here. Okay. Now I have, so this is a report that's based off of Direct Lake and Direct Lake here. Now this make changes to the model doesn't do editing of the model. It actually does kind of a composite model, DirectQuery over AS, which is actually a really cool application with Direct Lake because it gets around a ton of the Direct Lake limitations at this point. So what it does is it'll create a direct query to the Direct Lake semantic model. The Direct Lake semantic model is still doing Direct Lake to the OneLake data. But what's cool about it is now you can add in an import table, you can do calculate columns, you can do you can do everything you could do before because now it's technically direct query, but it's really only direct query to the Direct Lake model, and then it's direct query to the data. So it's something that people have like concerns about the limitations, it's actually one of the workarounds that works really well right now. But what I want to show here is I don't have anything formatted, of course, because I was apparently a little bit slack. And so if I do and that currency and not having the, oh, it has 1,000. Okay. And then we have the, let's see, orders, and we'll do these guys as also currency. Right, so I can make these changes here. I'll give them just 2 decimals, please. Right, so I'm going to go back to here and I'll refresh. Now you can hit this refresh button. Actually, I want to do the profit margin model. Percentage. Right, or you can go to optimize and just do refresh visuals. Both should bring it in. There you go. So I see some of the formatting coming in. There we go. So I formatted that. Let me just bring in one more piece of data here, and I'm going to show you kind of the difference on that direct link behavior. Right, so here I can come into optimize, go to that performance analyzer. Let's close some of these other ones, give some space. And I can refresh these visuals, and I can see they're coming back really well, right? This is 1 billion rows of data. You can see there's no direct query line. I can run this in DAX Query View, so I can still run these queries, see exactly what's happening. All this goodness right here on that direct link semantic model. Now, if I come back here, now I say, okay, so right, so what happens if it falls back? So let's go do direct query mode. Here, I'm going to come back. Now, it's going to be very slow on the first pass. Nothing is cached.
Great.
Right, so this is going to be a moment, and you can see, if I expand this, you can see that there is a direct query line, right? And I just did that, like I went over, came back, right? I didn't have to do anything fancy. And now you can see that data is a little bit slower, 16 seconds to come back on the card, 22 seconds on that one. If I refresh again, it should be faster on the second go around, right? Still, it's over 1 minute, 1 to 2 there on the seconds, sorry, not minutes, seconds.
Well, Stephen had an interesting comment to basically mention that direct query versus direct link, that if you have an option to use direct link, there doesn't seem to be any reason to ever go back to direct query, the older technology. Like
100%.
Yeah, it's only there if you have pro only for certain situations. But if you have a fabric capacity, you should essentially just always use direct link.
Absolutely, absolutely. 100%.
Yep.
So with this one behavior is really, if you want to keep it on the automatic, you want to see, okay, what happens in the worst case scenario, right? Say something happens. Sometimes there are transient things where it just needs to be, this direct link semantic model needs to be refreshed. It's called reframing, because it's not really refreshing data. It's just kind of making sure everything's happy in both. Sometimes it gets out of a little bit of, it needs to be reframed. And in that case, you'll see things falling back. You're like, okay, why are you falling back? But you're like, actually, I want to see an error, and then my customers would say, hey, by the way, what's going on?
Is that related to the kind of a cold start query versus a warm start query? Because the models will, if they haven't been accessed in a certain amount of time, they kind of get ejected from memory in replacement of others. And I know you can have a notebook script currently to kind of ping it every so often to keep it in memory. But it was what you were mentioning. Is that related to that or a different topic?
That's a different topic, right? So that's just after a while, like, so the same person comes in and runs this again, right? We have a certain cache, but the reframing is something like maybe there's a change that you did to the model that's now, it's like when you add a calculation group, right, from a tabular editor into Desktop that says, hey, I need to kind of perform a calculation refresh. It's kind of similar to that mechanism where something has happened, it needs to kind of refresh to get it back in happy direct link mode, but it's not to do with the cold cache.
Gotcha.
All right. So here we have, so that's kind of just a really quick one. So I created it. I'm creating a model here in desktop. And of course, soon we have editing of these direct link semantic models in desktop, where you will be able to kind of now not only have to go back and forth between the web and desktop, you can just do it all here, but it's still making that change to the one published in the workspace, because the analysis services engine for direct link needs to run in the Surface. It can't run on your computer. It's just too much too much resources. It can't do that. It has to do it on the workspace. So it's still going to be kind of editing it live like you would when you're web modeling, but that's coming soon as well. We have that on our release blog there. All right, so you're like, that's great, but maybe like there's one of the things you can do, like you already have your data in Fabric. Maybe you want to just utilize it and you already have a model created. You just want to change out the connection, right? So instead of using that SQL database you had, you want to use the SQL database that is in the SQL endpoint that's off that lakehouse, and you can do so, right? So we don't limit you in the way you want to use it. So if we go to blank report, now my import model here, I'll have to limit a little bit. I can't actually bring, this data is already too big for import. I tried, actually. It got unwieldy really quickly.
How big is big out of curiosity, just for people who maybe don't know what like the upper limits of this stuff is?
Yeah, so well for desktop, right? You can probably get to about 5 gigs and you're still a little sad because things are a little bit slower, but and your computer needs a lot of memory. But for this data specifically, I have 1 billion rows. I think I can bring in about 40 million, and then it's a gig in a PBX file. Right, so that's kind of where we're at. Like the way that we store the data, and the same for Parquet and Delta tables actually, and the way we store it natively in analysis services is highly compressed, right? But it uncompresses when we refresh, and then we bring the data in and then we compress it down. So you just have to be careful, especially on the refresh spike. All right, so here now, how do I get at that data? So here I'm in desktop. I can go to the One Lake Data Hub just like I could before. Right now, if I clicked on my semantic model direct lake, I get that connect option. But if I click on the lakehouse, right, the connect option here will right now try to connect to that default semantic model. But on this upside here, I can do the SQL endpoint. Now I can also have gone to this lakehouse here. So here I have, this is the SQL Analytics endpoint on that lakehouse, and I can do the same thing here, right? So I'm going to actually connect to the SQL endpoint of that lakehouse or the SQL endpoint directly. Either way, now it's going to prompt me to log in. Ta-ta-da. And I can pick my, so now you see this is that SQL endpoint connection here. The SQL, it's a very long string, right? And I can see my tables, right? So I can bring in those tables I had here. I can transform, I can use Power Query at this point, right? So this is just a regular direct query import semantic model. And I can pick if I want to import or if I want to direct query. This one I'm going to direct query because I would need to, I'll do an import one in a second, but I won't bring in the fact table. That one is a bit beefy. Right, so you can go ahead and bring those in. Now I have a direct query semantic model just like before. And I can do the same things I was doing before, right? So I can rename, let's do this one properly. Date, I can mark that date table, by the way, which I didn't do before. We can do row level security, all like that, create the measure. And we have sales, right? So here we have that data. I'm going to go and be Slack again, go find my query that created all my measures. Right. And here I can run it. It's going to take a little bit longer because we are now in direct query mode. Here it goes. And I can add these ones to this model, right? And I can even do my copilots, right? So there's my copilot here in desktop, same one that I had in the WebMod experience. I just have to pick the one that has my capacity backed workspace. So it says, I need a Fabric capacity to use Copilot, which one has it, and you can pick it. There we go. So I can do the same things here that I did before, create my relationships, all that goodness, right? But this one now is, of course, in direct query. I can add in additional data if I want. It validates the relationships, which is a little slower. Oh, actually, it finally worked. Okay, hold on. Let me just do that. Good. There it goes. You'll notice when I did the web one, we aren't actually validating the relationships. You have to be careful when you're creating the direct lake that you understand relationships between your tables.
Yep.
Because the queries can be really, really long. For like, not queries could be long, but it will run queries is really what I meant to say. So people were complaining about how many queries we were running, kind of validating relationships and things like that. So we turned it off for now. We do want to turn it back on eventually. We're just kind of waiting for kind of a good time to do that and making sure that, you know, we have that clearly understanding with our customers. All right, so
I
I've
had a
created
quick question
this.
just on the model with direct lake and direct query. Are you able to do hybrid models when doing a direct lake source? I'm essentially composite models, I would say, is a translation of that.
Exactly. So that is an excellent question. So there's no and yes. So no, not like in direct query here, right? I have the get data already running, right? I can just go, hey, go get me an Excel book, go get me this, and it just adds it. And then I have some tables direct query, some tables import, right? We don't have that behavior like in the web modeling experience. So the web modeling experience doesn't even have kind of that ability to use that Power Query kind of thing built in either. So now this is taking a long time to come back. Let's see. And then, but the yes part is I can make it a composite, as I was talking about earlier, direct lake semantic model. And then I can come and create a semantic model on top that's referencing that direct lake semantic model. That's a composite model, direct query over, used to be called direct query over analysis services. But now it's also called, or yeah, it's a long time. Now I think it's direct query over Power BI semantic models. And the other one is just composite V2. I've heard it called all those three names, right? I'm not sure what's happening here with I may not have set my credentials. Maybe that's what's going on because I ran a query. Anyway, let's go see what's happening real quick. Refresh, little card. Right, so this is pure direct query running here, and it is taking an inordinate amount. Oh, there it goes. But it's not showing any data, so I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. Let's just change this to maybe a table. Oh, there we go. Right, so we can see that data coming in. This is in direct query mode, just regular. I can go ahead and run. I can even change these to be kind of a hybrid, right? So I can actually go and move this over to an import mode. Right, and you can have that experience. So what I'm saying is that you can access this data however you please, right? So if you wanted to do an import, you don't have that much, you can still do import, you can do direct lake, you can do direct query, depending on what you're wanting to do. Of course, direct lake is the one that's new, optimized for this experience. Is the one we definitely recommend you use. But maybe you already have an import model, your data volumes aren't ridiculously high, you can actually just change out those connection strings. And so you've moved all your data into Fabric. It's not like huge. You want to do a proof of concept on this direct lake, make sure you're covering all your limitations. You can actually utilize your import model as is, right? Just change the connection to the new source where your data is on that SQL endpoint, and then see how it's running, and then it can still be in import mode until you have time to kind of adjust all your ETLs over into the lakehouse, right? So this one's now in import, right? And you can do an import model as well, right? Same steps as we did the direct query, just pick import. Now the other one here is, let's see. Okay, so we've gone over, you can create the direct lake. Now the one question you had, let me show you the yes answer. Right, so here's that model I created. I am live connected to the semantic model. This is a direct lake semantic model. Right, I haven't even saved this yet. Now you're saying, okay, but I really want to add something to this model, right? Things you can add right now are like you can add in field parameters, you can do calculation groups, you can do calculated tables, like all of those things are really import tables, right? But the calculated tables, you can add them, but you cannot reference that direct link table directly. So if you have a date table saying min and max of my sales, right, that's not allowed just yet. But now if I change this guy to that composite, I'm going to add the local model. Now, ooh, that's nice. Okay. Let me just try starting over just a second. Actually, I don't want to kill my visual. All right, let me save this and reopen this guy. My demo gods, they were being so nice with my Copilot. And now they're like,
He said something
no.
and jinxed it.
I jinxed it, exactly. So this is my direct link report composite. Okay. Maybe I needed to like restart. I had a previous version of desktop and I uninstalled and reinstalled. I should probably restart it between those two steps. Let's see if it'll work on the second go round. If not, I'll reopen.
There's one follow-up question just on the. Okay, yeah, I'll let you finish this. I was thinking it might take a second.
So now what I'm doing is I'm creating, instead of having a live connection to that direct link semantic model, I'm actually creating a direct query connection to that semantic model. You're like, okay, but so you told me if fallback is, you said not to do fallback. This is not a fallback. This is actually just direct query between two analysis services semantic models, right? So this is between the semantic models. It's not going to be to the data source. Yep. Right. So it's a little bit of a nuance, like it's extremely nuanced. Everything will show as direct query, but it's only direct querying to that first hop. Right. So now I have my composite, right? It's saving, it's doing the refresh. Now, if I do go to the performance analyzer, right? So if I open this up and I refresh it, they're still very fast, but you will see a direct query line. Now, but that direct query is only to the semantic model, the direct query semantic model, and then the direct query semantic model is still doing directly, but it doesn't kind of bubble up. We only see the first layer here. But as you can see, this is not 10 seconds, right? This is still sub-second, extremely fast. And now I can see, I can add additional data to my model, right? I can go ahead and I can even go bring in my product category as an import table if I wanted to at this point, right? I can do the relationships between it, all that kind of stuff. I can do, let's see, what else can I do? What other trouble can I get into here? I didn't test this the other day, but let me try it. Let's see if we can create a column, right? So my column equals 1, right? Let's see if it works. Look, I created a calculating column on my direct link table, so if I go here and I'll show the data here, there's my calculated column, right? I can still query it. You're like, where'd my data view go? This is in direct query mode, we don't show it, but that's why we have DAX Query View here to help. So I can do that. I can do a quick query to show me data just like I would before. I can do column statistics, right? So I can see what's going on in these tables, all that kind of stuff. So you get around a ton of the limitations with direct link just by kind of doing this mode. Now, the drawback is you now have to maintain a direct link semantic model, and you have to maintain this one on top of it, right? Yep. But you get around a lot of the, if you're like, I must have a hierarchy that shows up and analyze in Excel, right? You bring in that dim table as a import table, set up your hierarchy, your fact table still in direct link. So this is kind of the yes part of that question you asked, right? Can we have this? Now, in the future, we want to do it without having to do this extra step, right? Just have a table in direct link, table in import, one model, life is good, right? That's the future vision. That's where we're actually heading towards. So just keep that in mind. But for right now, you can do this step. All right, any other questions there, Reed?
Yes, there are a few. Let's see. One of them was just like the Power BI experience online in OneLake. Ben was wanting to know, is there going to be or when in the future will there be an option to use that get data and like Power Query kind of direct integration with it? I know there's down the pipeline you can have data pipelines and all that, but in that modeling experience, will there ever be an integration between the two of them?
Oh, absolutely. For the web modeling, like the open data model, right? If I go back to here, right, and I'm here, I have in my workspace here, I have an import model too, right? So here's my AdventureWorks import, and if I do open data model here, right, you're like, okay, but now I can't do transform data anymore. I can't bring in new data here because we don't have the Power Query experience built into kind of this experience. Yeah, so that's the future vision of this, is to absolutely do that. But yeah, it's not there just yet, unfortunately.
And perfect. Thank you for the answer on that. And I'm just looking at the feed for one of the other questions. So, I think there was one from Babu on connecting SQL specifically to a lakehouse, and I don't know if I know the entire context of that. If that question makes sense, otherwise I can ask him to maybe expand the question a little bit.
Yeah. So
yeah, because go ahead.
There are like kind of like let's see if I remember. I don't know if it's coming or if it's out now. I think they have something. If it's not out yet, they absolutely have kind of an idea coming for it. But let me just double check, see if it's here. Where's my recast? Right, so we can get. Actually, no, I need to go back to my model here. New. And then we have the mirrored, right? A mirrored SQL database, right? So if you already have a SQL database, you're quite happy where it's at, you can actually bring it into Fabric this way, right? So it'll mirror it, and now you can start utilizing it that way. You can shortcut it to in a lake house, all that kind of goodness, right? And bring it in that way. Hopefully that is answering your question.
Cool. Okay. And if not, feel free to elaborate on that as well then. But then I think yeah. Yep, those were the current questions. So perfect.
Awesome. So yeah, so just to kind of summarize, you create the direct lake semantic models in the lake house. You go to that new semantic model. You have all the options available to you. You can use tabulator, all that kind of stuff. You can kind of just be mindful of kind of the fallback behavior, and if you are strongly don't want it to happen, you can actually set it to direct lake only, and then you can also utilize your data in import and direct query as well. So once it's in Fabric, you have all these options available to you, just the same way you would before in Power BI Desktop. You can create those reports, obviously in Power BI Desktop in the web. And you can also then, if you have some of the limitations of direct lake, but you want to stay in direct lake, you have large data volumes, you're really happy with that, you just want to kind of add something in addition to it, you can also utilize that composite V2, that direct query over analysis of direct query over a published semantic model, and you can go ahead and do that kind of steps there. So it's a lot of really powerful options for you. And Reid, you wanted me to talk about a little bit what's next. Obviously, the vision with direct lake storage mode is it's just a regular storage mode, right? And you have everything you can do now with direct lake. So that's our future goal. Obviously, that's going to take us a while to get there. Feedback really helps. If you're like, I would do this, but I need X, Y, and Z, right? That helps prioritize kind of where we're going to spend our next efforts on, right? So it's going to be an incremental kind of step. The other part that we're really excited about, we talked a little bit about in FabCon in Vegas, was one, so there's two things we talked about. One was really the editing in direct and Power BI Desktop, right? So that one we're very excited. I demoed that in Vegas. We aren't quite there yet. And then the second one is this what we're calling direct lake on one lake, where we don't have that fallback option, right? So we're no longer tightly coupled with the SQL Analytics endpoint. We can just go ahead and just do direct lake, and that's it. And we're not going to have this helpful behavior where if something happens, we'll fall back to direct query, we'll utilize that SQL. And it means that there'll be siblings, which means anything you do on the SQL endpoint no longer impacts that direct lake semantic model, which is very helpful if you wanted to specify, maybe you wanted to have your SQL people go over to the SQL endpoint, you wanted to have certain role security there, and you want to have different role security on in that semantic model. Now you can have best of both worlds, right?
Well, to your mention about the Power BI desktop experience, and like kind of the integrations of that, because there's still a little bit of, because there's so many pieces in the pipeline now, you to sometimes have to look at the data or figure out the queries, you have to have a couple web browser pages open plus desktop and a few others. And that perfect world where end to end you could open desktop and, oh, that's right, this is the data flow. Okay, hold on, I got to go to the workspace, I have to open the data flow, open the browser, versus like whether or not it's a data flow, a warehouse, or a lakehouse, to be able to kind of seamlessly just look at any piece of the queries or the transformations really easily from a single environment, I'm sure will continue to reduce that friction. So that's my pipe dream, is I'd love to be able to look anywhere and
Oh,
either go downstream or upstream and just look at the data
so
processing.
sorry, Reed. I missed everything you just said. My headset's
Oh,
connected to my phone, and someone tried to call me, and it just blocked you,
no
which is
problem.
not so great. But I heard about that. So you're kind of like one place to go for end to end. You can see everything, just
Yeah,
like you can in Power BI
exactly.
Desktop now, but like
Hmm.
including all the Fabric items, which is a great feedback. So
Oh yeah, yeah, and I'm sure that I know the vision of more being able to edit more things in desktop, or even the option of because we have today, like if you connect to a recognized endpoint that Power BI recognizes as direct query available, it asks you, do you want to import this or direct query this? And
yeah,
uh, uh, getting that extra option to say like, oh, actually, like this could be direct lake, and then it just spits it into a either a new lake house that it creates for you, or you just select from a dropdown like, where would you like to place this table, and it puts it in there, automatically adds the direct lake connection into the model, and it's just that one extra drop down below import direct query direct lake for the people who have it available. But to your
exactly.
point, is it's just the friction reduction. Is you don't
Yeah.
have to hop between environments. It's all just done in one seamless development experience.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. Like, so right now we could probably do something like that, but then we wouldn't be able to have the edit experience in desktop at that point. Then you'd have to go and learn how to do it in the web and all these different things.
Yep.
But as you say, like if we brought all of those kind of things into desktop almost, and like say, okay, yeah, but if I go to get a transform data now, it's actually going to go open up that data flow Gen 2 and I can modify it here instead of having to be like, okay, well, actually, you can't do that now here. Go find it in the workspace. But yeah, so and it's true, like all these things we're trying to reduce the friction, make it very
Yep.
easy, make it so it's manageable, make sure it makes sense, but also make sure you're getting the best performance out of the reports, because the reports is really where it's really important to have that experience. And then as data volumes are already huge, right? Even if it's not just big
Yeah.
companies anymore, it's not big companies, it can be smaller companies,
Hmm.
individuals even, right? The amount of data we're collecting and can utilize. There's a reason why we have this direct lake storage mode, right? So we want to make it performant. We want to make it so these people can access this large amounts of data, utilize it,
Yep.
and get the most out of it in a timely manner. You don't have to wait. You don't have to set it off a job to like then come back later. You can just see that right as it's coming in.
And I don't know if it was mentioned on the stream, but the advice that I usually give is, and it generally boils down to categorizing it as fact versus dimension tables. But
Yep.
the best things to do direct lake connections against and to host centrally are your tallest tables,
Oh
which they
yeah,
used to be
absolutely.
facts. So like
Absolutely.
most of it, yeah, and to
And
the
fast changing. Like these are the ones that are bringing data
exactly,
in
yeah, yeah.
constantly,
And
right?
I've
If
found
you
that well, and just for the large tables, I've found that if you have a direct link connection against 3 or 4 fact tables sitting in different sources, I'll usually have local imported dimension tables that connect to them, and
exactly.
it travels between them faster than say grabbing a dimension table from one direct lake model that has to go to the other 3. So direct lake facts import dimensions, and that
Oh, you're
usually,
already doing the composite V2 trick. I see there, Reed.
yeah, but I've just like that simple just technique of just splitting what you do. Don't import your facts, direct
Yep.
connection to them, import your dims, because you're it's a couple thousand rows at the most
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
time.
And they don't change that often
Yeah,
either. Right? You can
exactly.
schedule to refresh maybe once a week or something, whatever you want,
Hmm.
and it's not a big deal. But the fact ones
Yep.
is really where you have to have all this stuff like
Yep.
heavy duty
And a
running
huge
on it. And
performance increase.
huge performance increase. And it also keeps the file small because you're not moving that data into desktop, moving it onto computer, right? It's still over there in the one lake doing its thing, not messing up your day. So
And also for resources or takeaways as we're wrapping up for this, so what would you
uh-huh.
recommend people go explore to either poke around and try, and I can split back to your screen, try this out themselves, or links or articles that I can drop into the chat?
Yeah, so obviously the direct lake documentation is a fantastic place to start. This will explain kind of all those things, what's happening,
Oh, wrong.
about kind of,
This button.
oh, sorry. There
There
you
you
go.
go.
All right, so direct lake documentation, right? We're always adding to this. Like it tells you, it kind of explains what's happening. You see kind of that, what the default semantic model is. creating that in, having XMLA, read write, how to actually turn that on, because you have to turn it on at capacity, right? So if your tenant doesn't have the XMLA read write on, you can actually turn it on your capacity, like especially on a trial, right? You can go ahead and do that yourself. You have kind of interesting, it's about the direct lake behavior, right? You can do it in XMLA. You can also do it in the UI, like I showed you. Fallback, when fallback happens, why fallback happens, all this information. Right, oh, there's the UI down here. Right, and it's just kind of really gets into the nitty gritty, like especially this, single sign-on. What does that mean? How does that work? How do you do fixed identity? We have a whole page on the fixed identity for the semantic model, with also talks about the shareable cloud connections, right? So there's a lot of really great information that you go through. Recently was about the edit tables, right? So that dialogue that shows up where you pick the tables, we're actually improving that a lot all the time. We want to eventually bring in like the columns in there as well. And kind of what does it all mean? It works.
Just to double check on what you just said. So for because you kind of have this now with the composite modeling scenario in desktop, where you make your own perspective technically by like selecting the tables. Is there a vision for being able to like actually go in and I only want 3 out of the 5 columns or measures? Would you actually be able to sub-select?
Exactly. Really eventually, you want to have the behavior. We technically do it now. Okay, you can do it now in XMLA. The problem is we didn't have a good way to bring it back. If you wanted to bring them back later, other than dropping the whole table and re-adding it back. So this is more of a UI limitation than a kind of functional limitation. So that's just, that's nice. Some of the things we can do, but it's just not there quite yet. But this kind of edit tables is kind of a new, it's almost like a table picker. I'm not sure what we call it, edit tables. It's not editing the table. It's just picking the tables you want in your semantic model as they are. How do you access it? What you can do here, like that kind of stuff. And then what else? We have creating this. So this is a really good place to start. And then the composite stuff and the web modeling have their own pages as well, where they talk about those particular limitations. And a topic I didn't get into today, which is actually really, really helpful especially when you're kind of editing these things live, right? You're like, oh, Zoe, this is great, but you made a whole bunch of changes and there's no undo, right? If you're doing Git integration, you have a built-in undo, right? So here I have my source control, everything I did today, right? Since I started the session, I had it synced at the beginning, right? And now I can see I have that new model and I have this, and I can actually just undo everything I just did, right? So this is actually kind of neat for demos, because then I can do all this demo stuff. I come here and I click undo. So, and of course you have, versions up in Git and all that kind of stuff, and you can do all those kind of things. So the Git integration is really powerful, especially when you're kind of having to kind of modify it kind of in the workspace.
Two questions for that. One on this, and then one just back on that other the field selection interface. But for this one, when you edit a report in the service, it doesn't auto-save. You have a save button, so you can choose when you want to version. Modeling's kind of a save as you go type of. So if you make 14 adjustments, do you get 14 versions in your source control, or is there a way to, prevent an overload of like 300 versions in a single day or something?
Yeah, so this one is kind of a bit more, it's not as slick as all of that. Now ALM toolkit, of course, is an external tool you can utilize as well and do all those kind of things. This one is a little bit brute force, right? It's just since the last time I did my Git integration. There are stuff coming up in the pipeline that will kind of address it a little bit more granularly as well. We've heard feedback like that is like, we want to kind of see what happened, where did we go back to, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's all coming as well. But for right now, it's kind of at least some sort of, you do something accidental, you deleted something, and you're like, oh no, that table had 30 relationships or something ridiculous, and you're like, now what? You can actually just go back to the last time you did this. So just do this often. It's not automatic. It's not doing it, for you. You'll have to kind of opt into this experience right now, but we will have some that are more streamlined, as we're talking about kind of before the stream, like having stuff that, we have all these really great features, just kind of making more streamlined, reducing the friction is kind of what we're at.
It's good to be able to roll back for that. I actually just had, an opportunity related to like model deployment where having the Git control was very useful to roll back, because I ended up accidentally deploying from dev to prod, but I forgot that one of the models is dependent on another one, and they both shift from dev to prod when they move forward. So I forgot to deploy that one first. So the other one did deploy, but now it's looking for a table name that's not the same. So I do hope someday there's a little bit of a warning message. This is dependent on a model in another workspace. Would you like to go deploy that first?
Exactly. You're like, I'm gonna need a check right here. I know people have done actually some really cool things. I think it's John Karski. I don't know if he's on the chat or not, but he does amazing stuff with DAX queries, because DAX queries are part of the PBIP.
Yep.
And so he creates them and then he includes them in the deployment the pipeline, and make sure that things get checked and stuff, which is amazing. Kind of utilization.
He's in the chat now, by the way.
I figured he would be. He's always on my chat, so I appreciate you. But yeah, so that's I have to like fully look it so I can demo it better. But yeah, it's amazing. So
one final little thought and oh, thank you. Somebody is saying some nice accolades in the chat for us, but the just back on the field selection and composite modeling, like it's one of my favorite features. One of my biggest gripes on that, and I'm curious if this is coming at some point, is to use that you have to add a composite model locally. Like I build perspectives for clients, and a lot of them get confused. Like, why does this report have a model? It's a thin model. Yeah, but the only way to access a perspective to change it is you have to add an empty local model for that report to change perspectives. And I'm hoping at some point that gets removed, where you can do a thin report to a live model without while changing perspectives, without having to add a completely empty vessel for the composite. But I don't like, is that in the vision at any point,
So there's two parts to that question, right? So you're creating these composites so you can bring in those, as you said, to have multiple lakehouse, different tables, and you can have all these things, right? So you're building this, thing like that. And then you want to be able to remove columns and add columns from different ones as you please, which is fantastic. And that does support it. Another thing you can actually do is actually just do perspectives on your direct lake semantic model, right? So that does support. We don't have the UI for like proper perspectives. It's on my list. I really want to get it done. It's, we brought it into where you can kind of see these perspectives right here. But we don't have the authoring experience just yet. But if you do add those, you can add those in the direct lake semantic models as they are, right? Just native without the secondary model on top. So
if you do create a perspective though, when connecting in Power BI desktop, the only way to change your perspective, like you can say, if you go to make changes to this model, you get your checklist where you can make your own perspective, or there's the little extra hierarchy drop down at the top for yours. So exactly.
If you had it already defined in that direct lake and you did the composite v2, then you can say, actually, I want to use that one. So it's kind of a quick way of doing it.
Exactly.
Let's see.
It's and it works for most customers, but there's a few customers who actually have composite modeling turned off on the tenant, so then you can't ever get to the perspectives because it requires that empty vessel of the composite model to let you choose that new show and hide scenario. And hopefully someday goes away. It's a small friction point, but it's one of those, like, I feel like the composite model, I don't think it would be necessary from a code perspective. I feel like it's a UI limitation more than it's a feature limitation.
Exactly. It really is. I think, and also just making sure that we do our due diligence, making sure it works in all scenarios as well. It's kind of what makes it more of an expensive thing, and it competes with other priorities. But yeah, definitely something I would love to do.
Exactly. And I'll come back to here, but any closing remarks then as we wrap up? I think I got the good resources, some really good conversations here at the end. Any closing thoughts or epiphanies for the audience?
So just try it out. Like one of the things I really just wanted to kind of demonstrate with this today is, having the data in Fabric really opens you up to that new direct lake mode. But you don't have to, like, if you wanted to, it doesn't block you from using existing storage modes, right? And utilizing everything that Power BI has to offer, right? The composite v2, now you can, get around a lot of those, like limitations that Ree was talking about. You can have those direct lake tables, multiple lake houses. You can have You can have the import thing, you can have your hierarchies, you can have all those experiences you're used to having in Power BI. You're not limited at all. And Fabric only adds to the Power BI experience.
And one final just question on Direct Lake then, because I actually get this asked a lot from people, is now that Direct Lake's available, should I just stop using import? Should I just Direct Lake everything? Or should you still kind of use a mixture of both?
It absolutely depends, right? It depends on the scenario you're trying to achieve, right? We offer so many possibilities and options for you because there's not one size fits all for every analytics solution, right? So you need to kind of look at it, see what's best for you, right? Direct Lake is fantastic because it solves a lot of issues like moving of data, people who want to download the PBAX, who want to create report changes, who want to make these adjustments to things to suit a specific purpose, do an ad hoc report here and there, right? It really just depends on what you want. Like there's different considerations. You want to do embedded, you want to do just like a publish to web. Maybe you just want to put in something public up for the thing. You can't use directly for that, right? You'd still want to use import, right? Stuff like that. So it really depends on your situation, how much data you're bringing in, what is your top concerns, how do you want your people to use it and reuse it. And kind of also a big one is data volume, right? How fast it's coming in, how much. There's big tall tables, right? Right, when you sometimes import's not even possible in some of those situations, right? We have a whole bunch of things to help out, incremental refresh, we have all those kind of things, and then if eventually at some point you have to go to DirectQuery, and then you're like, oh gosh, now I have to do all those other things. We want to make it as easy possible with Direct Lake, right? You don't have to do any of those fancy things anymore. You just hook it up and everything's running fine. So really it depends, right? So just like, I think I get this question a lot, like we have the web experiences and we have desktop. Is desktop going to die? No, desktop's not going to die. We want to make sure you have all the options that you want so that you can get the most out of your data, right? And that's the whole point.
Exactly. And to your point, for a lot of scenarios, imports, it's been around since day one. It's still the easiest and quickest to get out the door for like a really simple model and data set. But when you need to upgrade or expand, create less siloing, like there's all these additional options to then leverage all the new items in Fabric and Direct Lake scenarios for centralized data when data needs to be centralized. If you're a company that's building one report and model, you don't need to probably do any other features other than just deploy the model and the data set with itself. And then that's when you can upgrade down the road.
Exactly.
And explore all of that other stuff. So perfect.
Exactly. And once we get Direct Lake more integrated with desktop, right? And then we can even we can really even expand into space where so you don't have to move the data around, right?
Yep, exactly.
So, anyway, but yeah, this has been great, Reed. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you so much for coming on. Love to have you back on as well in the future as this stuff continues to evolve and grow. And I'm sure there will be more exciting features coming down the pipeline. Yeah,
so many. I want to tell you all of them, Reed, but
I'm sure you have a similar struggle, but like, coming from the MVP universe, there's definitely times where I have to pause, like, wait, is this something public or private that I'm allowed to talk about? It's hard to keep track of it in your head.
All the time.
Yeah, 100%.
If it's not my features, like I know where my features are at, but then I see something, I'm like, has it always been there? Is it new? Is it released? I'm not sure. So I try to be very careful when I'm sharing, just because I have no idea.
Exactly. Perfect then. I want to wish you a good rest of your Friday then, and enjoy your weekend as well. It's at least pretty hot today, so. Yes,
I'm in the same heat wave you are.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad we did this call earlier because this is an upstairs room, so it's going to get quite warm again.
Excellent. Then yeah, enjoy your weekend.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.